This is Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles video cast. Tonight we are doing, by popular request, a show all about probably one of the most divisive albums that Paul McCartney ever recorded, which is Press to Play, and the very name of our show comes from a track off that album. So we are going to dig deep into the album tonight. We are very curious to hear what you guys have to say about it. I think we're going to have differing opinions on it, so we are very, very excited to just get into it. So before we though, let me introduce myself. My name is Kit O'Toole. I am the author of Songs We're Singing, Guided Tours Through the Beatles' Lesser-Known Tracks, as well as Michael Jackson FAQ, All That's Left to Know About the King of Pop. I also write for a variety of sites, including Something Else Reviews and Blinded by Sound and Beatle Fan Magazine. So let me bring on the good friends and colleagues that I'm privileged to host this wonderful show with every other Monday. First off, and he is raring to go here, so I'm going to introduce him first. You know him from his very popular YouTube channel, where he talks about his adventures in collecting and does a lot of comedy as well, including he managed to score some toilet paper at this very, very confusing time. So way to go, Joe. You know him by Mean Mr. Mayo, but we call him Joe Mayo. So hey, Joe, how's it going?
Hello, kid. Ursa Major, Ursa Minor.
That's right. That's right. Those are the key words for tonight. Secondly, you know him from his popular podcast, now also a video cast, Two Legs, a Paul McCartney-centric broadcast talking about all things Paul, all of his recordings. Great, great show. Mr. Tom Hunyadi. Tom, how's it going?
It's going great, and as we all know, Oklahoma. Never like this.
That's right.
Yeah, it was never like this, that's for sure.
Hope y'all are doing. Hello, I hope you all are doing well. Kit, Ken, and Mayo. Good to see you guys once again.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Good to see you guys as well. Absolutely. And last but definitely not least, a definite legend in the Beatles community. You know him from his long time running syndicated show, Every Little Thing. He is also the co-host of the very popular podcast, Things We Said Today. He is also the king of chart knowledge. You want to know anything about chart position, he's your guy, okay? So say hello to Ken Michaels. Hello, Ken.
Hi, Kit, and I will chart your introduction for this show at number one. Debuting at number one. Hello,
like
guys.
it.
Hi.
Lady.
How you doing, Ken?
And we got some good times coming tonight.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, we are.
That's right. You're going to hear a lot of those kind of references tonight, folks. So just get ready.
And I had
to
shut the blinds because I could feel the sun shining through. So now we're.
It's not true.
Oh.
Come on.
Now let's not get angry. Let's not get angry.
Why?
Enough already.
Right.
Joe's like, I'm out of here. All right. So, and so let's Ken Craig Reed says, great shirt.
Oh yeah. For special occasions. I bought this in
Absolutely.
1986 when the album came out. And these days it usually only fits around my ankle. But I'm wearing it tonight, breathing in real deep.
now, where was that shirt sold back in 1986?
I don't. Maybe at the fest.
Mm.
I can't imagine any other place that I could have gotten it at the time.
Okay. So
unless
it's not
I
an
got
official.
I might have gotten it from Capitol. I might have gotten it from Capitol. Yeah.
Wow.
Is it?
Did they give you the album free when you got the shirt?
Well, let's see. I got to remember that far back. Probably. I was doing my show in New Jersey on WDHA when I was playing the album. They probably gave me a free album then. So
Nice.
I'm sure.
Mm.
Pay the
Great.
perks.
Nice.
Last,
All right. Well, we've got a lot of viewers tuning in. Hello, everybody, and they are amped to. You guys are amped to discuss press. Let's get to it. So, press to play. This came at a very interesting point in his career. You know, remember Paul was coming off of Pipes of Peace, which, while it had the huge hit of Say Say Say, which we've talked about a lot on this show, you know, critically was not, you know, as much of a high point for him. And then came Broad Street, which, of course, the movie did not do well commercially or critically. So he was in a spot where he felt, I think, he needed to change up his sound, you know, needed to be more modern. And so he decided not to work with George Martin this time, wanted to work with some different producers, and started, you know, this new phase with Spies Like Us. You know, that was sort of the first, you know, first inkling that this was going to be a new, more modern Paul. Then, you know, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but then in 1986 came Press to Play, and brand new producer. Also brought in some heavyweights, Phil Collins and Pete Townsend guested, but otherwise some, you know, studio pros. And so comes out. So you guys now, Tom, I know you've said you didn't listen to it when it first came out, but listen to it later. What were your first? Yeah. What were your first impressions? No matter when you heard it.
Well, being
Tom, what do you think?
You know, being born in '73 and being an '80s kid, you know, that music is, I mean, familiar with it, very familiar with it, and I've accepted it over the years. I don't like all of it. I do appreciate some of it. However, McCartney has established himself as a certain musician. I mean, obviously he loves to experiment, and I love that he loves to do that. And I know he wants to, you know, in the '80s he started working with the hot producers at the time, trying to change his sound a little bit, and I was for that. And then when I first heard that album, I did get to see Press when it premiered on MTV, and I thought it was a good song. And I think the song was made better by the fun video, and I really enjoyed it even then. But then once I did start listening to the album in the early '90s, it was a little different. I don't know if I would say I wasn't prepared for what I was hearing, because, you know, you listen to the first couple of songs and, you know, you don't, you know, with Stranglehold and Good Times Coming, you might be expecting something a little different. And then you get into, you know, Talk More Talk, and then you get to Pretty Little Head, Move Or Busker. It's a whole different thing. And even though I'm more in the middle of this when it comes to this album, I can understand why people might not like it. I can understand why people love it. But it's not always something that I go to listen to. However, I don't hate it I don't hate the album at all. I still enjoy a lot of it, but there is some of the album, which we'll get to when we get to the songs, that still, no matter how many times I listen to it, I mean, you can listen to a song millions of times, and if it just doesn't agree with you, it just doesn't agree with you. I don't care if there's a story to the song. I don't care if the lyrics are great or what. But if you listen to it a million times and if you're just not digging it, then, you know, I mean, what else is there to say? You know, but there is times where I really like a lot of this album, and then there's a little bit here and there where the album just doesn't, you know, work for me. And, you know, once we get to the songs, I'll point out for which works and what doesn't work for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Joe, how about you? Just sort of in general before we.
Can I just want to say one last thing is, I really think the success of Spies Like Us being a top 10 hit really influenced him to kind of go into that direction as well. You know, I think, you know, because it was more of a little, you know, 80s sound. I know how much Ken likes that term. But I do think that with that song being successful, I think that kind of gave him the confidence to kind of go into that direction. So, but that's it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I absolutely, I agree with that. So, okay, Joe, just overall, and our viewer Marvin G says, I'm ready to hear Joe's take. All right, so we're
He remembers. He remember a lot of people who watch my channel for any length of time. The video is no longer up, but other people have taken
Oh, no.
copies of it.
uh-oh. So,
I kind of did a review on it once, and I was joking around to
so
doing
like
things
just first
to the
first general impression.
Yeah. All
What
right.
was your
Well,
reaction?
in '86,
Yeah.
first of all, I want to say though, I did love Spies Like Us.
Mhm.
I think Paul really rocks out on it. I love the way it just builds to that ending, especially when he's really going crazy with it.
Mhm.
So I enjoy Spies Like Us. I'm also a fan of '80s music. I love the '80s, and during particularly around '83 was really when I was at '84. I was going to clubs a lot. That was just my time when I was out, just starting to go to clubs, have some drinks, dance, all this stuff. And so I loved the '80s. But when that album came out, I just didn't like anything about it. I didn't like a single track on it at the time. And most of the time, I find even with Paul, as much as I love Paul, a lot of his albums, even the best ones, on first listen, I was like, gee, I got to give this a couple of listens, and then I come to usually to love them.
Hmm.
Some examples would be Tug of War of all things. I remember hearing it and saying, oh, I don't know, a couple of tracks I liked immediately on Tug of War, but I needed after the third listen. I'm like, what was I crazy? I really like this. Is a great album. It's so well produced. Same thing for albums like the album Flaming Pie. First time, I was like, I came to love it. Flaming Pie is now in my personal top five. Same thing with his album New that came out in 2013. I was saying, where's all the catchy hooks and everything? And after the second or third listen, I'm like, yeah, there they are, and I really liked it. The reason I'm saying this, and New is also, by the way, along with Flaming Pie, in my top five. The reason I'm building up to that is just to cover myself because in subsequent listens with Press to Play, it just never ever grew on me, and it's got to the point where there were a few songs I do enjoy. I'm going to tell you, for example, "Press" the single, I think is helped immeasurably by the video, which Tom had said how much he enjoys the video with it. That sold me right away. Sometimes that can happen, It's funny how that works sometimes. That's why they do them, right? Some of these videos. And I love that song now. And I also love Only Love Remains, which even that one didn't really tickle my fancy for the longest time. But I played the album, I'm going to say this is 34 years, 10 to 12 times. Now, that's not a heck of a lot of times in 34 years, but I just couldn't. Every time I try to go back to it, I'm like, I just wasn't getting into it. And I played it one other time this last couple of weeks since our last show. I said, let me give it a few more spins. I tell you, honestly, I was really like, I wanted it to end. If I'm to be honest about it, I'm like, yeah, I like what I like on there, and there were a few others that we'll get into. I'll name some other things I do enjoy somewhat, you know, but 'cause we don't want to go through all the songs right here. But it's just one that never grew on me, no matter how many listens that I've given it. Unlike the other ones I mentioned earlier, which came to be real favorites. So, and it's not the for me personally. I know some people are turned off by the '80s production. For me, it's not that at all. I mean, the song "Press" has '80s vibe to it. "Pretty Little Head" has I kind of enjoy bits of that. That has kind of a, you know, I guess you'd say what. With a band, Dead or Alive or Depeche Mode, even some that kind of '80s deep kind of voice, and I kind of like that about it. But overall, to me, it's if I'm going to list them, probably next to last album for me, of the original studio albums.
So it just never, it
It
just
just
never
never
really,
clicked.
never
I
clicked.
wish
Yeah.
everything could click. Most do. Most of them do.
Yeah.
Just never clicked with me. Still hasn't.
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
and that's the case. I mean, absolutely. Some do, some don't. I mean, that was Driving Rain with me. I mean, that's the reaction I had with that. So I'm sure we'll get to that in a
I'll
future
save that for
episode.
another time.
Yeah, we'll save that for another day. But just as a just an example that, yeah, I mean, sometimes it just doesn't doesn't hit you. Absolutely. So, okay, Ken, I think I can guess what your answer will be, but what were your first impressions?
Well, when it comes to most albums, it takes me a while to get to know it.
Mhm.
Every single album on first listen, there'll be a few songs that leap at you, that you
Mm,
like instantly. And then the rest of the album, you got to get to know. So, like, for example, when Egypt Station came out, I'm certainly glad I didn't make a comment about it on first listen. It took me like 5 or 6 listens before I was really hooked on Egypt Station. But when Press to Play came out, I immediately loved Press as a single. I can't understand why it wasn't a bigger hit. I've never been affected by videos. I like watching videos, but the music is always separate for me, so I don't judge a song based on the power of the video. But Press, I think, is an outstanding song, incredibly catchy. Love the guitar solo in there.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
production,
Good.
um, Only Love Remains from the get go has been, to me, the greatest love song that Paul has done after the Beatles. And he's
Oh,
done quite a lot of great love songs. But everything about that song I love, compositionally, production wise. His vocals are amazing. But when the '80s were around, I liked them. I think I love the '80s music a lot more now than I ever did. I was never anybody that was ever affected by this idea of certain music being dated. And we've talked about this here on this show. I don't It has no effect on what I think about the music because, like I've said, a lot of early Beatles music to some people sounds very dated. A song like She Loves You, to me, is a very dated song. Do you think it's dated, guys?
Yeah, but like you say, it doesn't
yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
right.
but I'm just trying to prove a point.
Yeah.
A lot of
Mhm.
people think Sergeant Pepper is a very dated album.
Mm.
Nothing's ever going to stop me from loving that album. So every
No.
time I keep hearing that an album or a song is dated or is of its time, it really bothers me because if you think the only music that's worth listening to is what sounds contemporary, then you're eliminating most of the music that's ever been recorded. So
Absolutely.
that would be, a great injustice. We shouldn't just listen to songs that sound fresh and contemporary. So the '80s stuff, over time, I've grown to really love this album. It is now my second favorite McCartney album, post Beatles, including Wings, right behind Flowers in the Dirt. And in particular, I especially love the songs that we tend to think of for the '80s, like Talk More Talk, um, Pretty Little Head. There was never a song like Pretty Little Head that Paul ever put out before that song. I love the fact that he was doing something different. And
Hmm.
anytime that he experiments and does something that is, it's not something that's safe, what you expect him to do, not in his comfort zone, I really, appreciate him for doing that. And I admire him for doing that. And I don't think he was trying to copy Phil Collins or the other artists of that time. I think no matter what, when Paul writes a song, he has his own style of writing. A Paul McCartney composition doesn't sound like a Phil Collins composition or a Police composition from Sting, who also had Hugh Padgham working with him.
Right.
It's just the production that was
It's the
applied to Paul's.
production. Right. Right. You're
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
so, I mean, Pretty Little Head and Talk More Talk don't sound anything like a Phil Collins song to me. And I think it really worked. I love the production on Press to Play. It's as flawless an album in production as you can get, as far as I'm concerned. The balance of everything is wonderful. And I love every single song on that album, including the 3 bonus tracks. And, there's a lot of Paul McCartney albums where I'll say, I like every song. I won't say I love every song, but I do love every song on Press to Play. I really do. I love the variety on it. I love the traditional Paul, like Only Love Remains, and I love the adventurous Paul in Talk More Talk and Press and Pretty Little Head. So
Hmm.
that's, I loved it from the very beginning. It took a while for it to grow on me, but it's one that I've really grown to appreciate a lot through all these years.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, I'll echo what Tom said. I'm an '80s kid, and I guess I had a couple of reactions to it. That on the one hand, yes, when you first listen to something like Pretty Little Head, it is a little bit of a shock, because coming off of like No More Lonely Nights, so,
Right.
which was a huge hit at the time. Yeah, that's a little bit of a a little shock to the system. That does not sound like, the Paul McCartney, but it, on the other hand, it did fit in very much with what I was listening to at the time as well. So it wasn't that big of a shock for me that I couldn't enjoy it. And so really, when I thought it was great to start off the whole album with Stranglehold. I mean, to immediately have
Yeah.
that drum, boom, and the guitar coming in. I mean, I thought that immediately grabbed me. I mean, that just immediately made me listen. And sure, there was some weird stuff on there, but I mean, I thought that was cool. I mean, it was just a way for him to stretch out a bit, and I wrote about this album a bit in a book you guys may have heard of called Songs We're Singing. It's just a cheap plug, and and I did. But one of the things that I pointed out, so, oh, there you go, yeah.
Yeah.
But in it, I talk about how this could be seen as sort of a precursor to what he started doing with the Fireman and
Exactly.
things like. Yeah, I mean it's and he was praised for doing that later. And for some reason, when he did it for Press to Play, I mean, just some people just lambasted him for it. So I mean, there are there are one or two tracks I'm a little iffier about, but for the most part, I really enjoy it. I still play it quite often. We'll get into some individual tracks next, but I think it has a lot of variety to it. And as I've been listening again to some of the songs the last few days, it really hasn't dated as much as I thought it had. Some of the production, because I know that's the complaint that a number of people have, and not all of it is that dated. I don't think. And Ken, you've made the point a number of times, and I think it's true, that if Peter Gabriel had recorded this album, that it wouldn't.
Hold the phone. Hold the phone. Ken, I've heard Ken say this many times. Here's the thing. People like Peter Gabriel and people like David Bowie, they establish themselves as people, chameleons, and people that will change, and it's accepted from them. It's not necessarily accepted, not really expected or accepted from people from like Paul. And you can't compare everybody else from Paul. Paul is a completely different planet. Yeah. And he's established himself as a pop artist, a hit maker, somebody that you don't have to be a hardcore fan, to like a lot of Paul's music. So I think that's something completely different when you say if Peter Gabriel, which he has done music like this, and Hugh has worked with Peter Gabriel, and as a matter of fact, the drummer has played with Peter Gabriel, Jerry Murata, and then the guitar player Carlos has played with Bowie. So I mean, so I can see that him getting that help from those camps. And I accept that he wants to try this, and I think that's great. But I don't think you can say that because it's different. I think it's apples and oranges.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Well, so, I mean, Peter Gabriel never would have recorded Only Love Remains. I agree with that.
The thing to me, a mediocre song is a mediocre song, and this album is full of them. As far as I'm concerned, it's some of Paul's less works that he's ever done, except for Only Love Remains. I think Only Love Remains is probably the only song where I could ever think that it's a Paul classic or close to it. Not everything has to be a classic because I try to be fair now. I love Back to the Egg. It's one of my all-time favorite albums that Paul was involved in, and yet you might also argue the same thing. Well, does it have to be is there anything on there that's really a classic song? Maybe, maybe not. But for me, that's what I'm trying to stress. In my opinion of this, is that
Mhm.
to me, it's just that the songs weren't there for me.
Mhm.
It's not the production. If Peter Gabriel had done, I don't care who did. No, I don't like the
Yeah.
songs much,
Mhm.
except for the two that I mentioned. Then bits and pieces and things about some other ones have moments. And what I think is interesting is I was listening to the CD,
Mhm.
and you learn something new every day, even though I should have known this years ago. But
Mhm.
in looking at the authors, the co-authoring with Eric Stewart, I said, "Huh." I said, "Only Love Remains" is all McCartney. I don't know if that's
Mhm.
anything to do with it, and so is Press, I believe.
Right.
And there were a lot of the ones that I wasn't so keen on were McCartney slash Stewart. Now, I I didn't do that, intentionally. I just was looking at it and I thought,
Mhm.
well, I didn't really realize that he was involved in so many of the co-authors. I really didn't.
Oh yeah.
Be- because you have, it's like, why, do you listen to something if you don't really care for it the first handful, 4, 5, 6 times, whatever it might be? Why? Because it's Paul, and I want to try to hope that that day comes where it clicks,
Uh-huh.
but it just hasn't come yet. But it's not over till it's over.
Okay.
But
Well,
that's how I
I,
feel.
I have to say, this is my opinion that I think that all the songs here are strong. I mean,
Mhm.
let's face it, Oklahoma was never like this is not exactly the greatest lyric in a
No.
song. And from what I read, it was a line that stuck in Paul's head and he couldn't get it out and he couldn't
Right.
think of something that would fit
Mhm.
at the time that would make better sense. So he just went with it.
Well, the
Okay, so
salamander line and getting close is not great either,
right.
but I
No.
like that. I love that song though.
Okay, but
Mhm.
you know, I just love all the different songs and the variety in there. You've got more traditional, like I said, Paul.
Yep.
Stranglehold is more of a traditional sound from him. Move Over
Absolutely.
Busker is more of a traditional sound from him.
Mae West in a
Angry.
sweaty vest, notwithstanding.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think as compositions, they're very good and they're very interesting. I love the fact that he, experimented, like I said,
Hmm.
and gave you something different. That's what I
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
most of all about after, see, in the 70s, with the one exception, well, a couple exceptions, of George Martin producing Live and Let Die and Chris Thomas co producing Back to the Egg, Paul
Right.
produced everything.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And then he had the George Martin trilogy there with the
Right.
three albums that he produced. So then he started thinking to himself, who should I work with? And he didn't want to have to produce entirely by himself. So we went with a lot of the contemporary producers of that time. And it was also because I'm sure he admired their work, you
Yeah.
know, just like he admired the producer for Adele,
Mhm.
Greg Kirsten for Egypt Station. He listens to some of what's out there today, and if he likes the sound, he wants to go with some of those producers. And I do happen to feel that there's a lot of fans out there, especially, and I see this a lot in social media, that don't like when Paul tries to sound contemporary.
Yeah.
So you could say whether it's through Hugh Padgham or it's through Greg Kirsten, Ryan Tedder. I've seen comments, please don't work with Ryan Tedder again. There are
Love
people
nothing
that
for
don't.
free. You can't get more bizarre and unusual, unconventional for Paul than that.
And I
Well,
like that.
I love that, but I'm
Yeah.
saying that there's a trend here of fans that don't really want to see change,
Right.
change
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
the sound of the
There are some.
production.
There are some.
They'd
Yeah.
rather that Paul was the old Paul of Beatle Paul or the 70s Paul that had that certain more pure organic sound. And those
Mhm.
fans tend to gravitate towards albums like Flaming Pie
Mhm.
or Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. And they don't like the more modern stuff. I'm glad that you like new, Joe.
Oh,
You
I
know,
love
Yeah.
no. Oh,
yeah,
I love it.
but there are fans that don't like when Paul is working with the new producers or new artists of today because they see that as him trying to want to have a hit again and he should be more true to his roots. But I think the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
like when Paul works with different producers because every album has a different sound to it. And
Yeah.
that way
They
it
didn't.
doesn't get boring.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
You
they
know,
didn't
true.
say that about the Beatles when Sergeant Pepper came out. That didn't sound like their
Yeah,
Beatlemania
but this is
stuff,
why
you know?
I want to throw in McCartney too again. Now, there's a talk.
Hmm.
Let's talk about an album that I didn't, first listen to. I was like,
uh,
oh, my goodness, what's this? I
Yeah.
love McCartney too. Absolutely love it, and I loved it in 1980. That's the same,
Mhm.
like the summer that it came out after a few listens. So, and again, I guess I'm speaking just for myself. Again, my opinion
mm,
of what I like and don't like, but you can't get more experimental, trying something odd, doesn't sound like you, than that. And I liked it because I just think for me, the songs are appealing. It's kind of funny, even stuff like, I guess, bogey music, dark room.
It's
Mhm.
upbeat. I think
I don't
it's
know.
the tone. I think it's the tone of the production, and to me, like in McCartney too, like a bogey music or
Mhm.
coming up. I mean, it sounds more positive, or it just sounds more uplifting, or however you want to say. I don't know if I'm describing it right.
Mm,
So where
Mhm.
some of the tones on Press to Play maybe be a little bit more eerie or a little bit more
Yeah.
down. It just didn't, in from my listening experience. But
mm.
Mhm.
that doesn't mean I hate it by any
Oh
means. But
no.
I just think, I think it's something a lot of people just gravitate towards that more poppy, uplifting sound.
Hmm. Yeah.
mhm.
Speaking of tracks, and
Yeah,
some of our viewers are already throwing in.
let's do
What
it.
are some of you think are some of the stronger tracks on this album? Some of the ones that you think are some of the ones that really stand out. So Joe, you've mentioned "Only Love Remains."
Okay,
I think
I'll
that
some of the stronger tracks. Only
yeah.
Love
Hmm.
Remains.
Yep.
No. Good Times Coming. Feel the Sun. I kind of, even back in '86, I like that, so that's okay. I don't love it, but I was
Hmm.
thinking how I could never put my finger on what the beginning sounds like when you hear the people check "Good Times
That's
Coming."
the
So it sounds
waves,
like,
the
yeah,
waves,
like maybe they're like playing on the beach or something, or sometimes I think
right?
it's like a Viagra commercial now, or some kind of like, like some kind of like an ad for a drug or something. Yeah, by today's standards. But I kind of have fun with that. Talk more talk. I'm glad to say, because that's our title.
Theme song.
Mhm.
But I like the chorus of that.
Mhm.
I don't like. I think a lot of people have said all that, the talking effect, the dialogue, or all that. I'm not wild about that. That kind of gets in the way a little for me. Um, um, uh, Footprints. I know everybody loves Footprints. I think it's okay. I'm supposed to like it a lot more, I think, as a Paul fan, because you think I would, but that's one of the better tracks, I think. Uh, Move Over Busker. I like the vibe to it. I kind of like, the melody, the tune, and everything. The chorus. Some of the lyrics I don't like. It's funny though. I've said this a million times. If you don't really like a song too much, you can pick on lyrics and say, yeah, look at the lyrics. But if you love a song, whether it's Bebop Alula or something like that, you don't care. You
Uh-huh.
just, who cares? You say My Salamander, and I love, it's a good rocker.
Right.
Getting closer. And however absurd, even after all these decades, I still can't make up my mind after like a dozen or more listens if I like it or not. It's like I think so. I'm like,
Yeah.
I think I might, but I'm not sure. It's
Yeah.
just a weird song.
Yeah.
That one for me.
I agree.
And angry, angry. To me, that's just a throwaway rocker, just a rocker,
Huh.
but not a good one. It's not bad. None of these, I would say, none of these, by the way, would I say, wow, wow, these are absolutely horrible. To me, I'd say they're unremarkable, with the exception
Yeah.
of Press and Only Love Remains,
Yeah.
maybe. Uh, that- there's some thoughts for you.
All right, absolutely. And yeah, I agree with you. By the way, on Footprints, I know I agree with you. Like I feel like I should like it more than I do, and it's just never really.
For me, it's got its moments. It's the
Yeah, it
beginning,
does.
part. Um,
But yeah, love the beginning. Love the beginning, but yeah, it just kind of drifts off after that, and it's just
yeah,
so.
Mm.
Once again,
Mm.
once
yeah.
again, we
I'm
agree on
relieved.
something.
I'm relieved.
Okay, Ken. How now? I know you like all the all the tracks, but what are some that you think are particularly strong?
Well, as I said, "Only Love Remains," I think, is the
Mhm.
greatest love song of his post Beatles career. Um, it's actually "Tough on a Tightrope," which is one of the 3 bonus tracks on the CD, I think is an amazing song. You
Mhm.
know,
I
I
agree.
just think that melodically everything works. That middle bridge, I'm often accused of giving too little. It's got me confused. I'm split down the middle. You know, that whole part, that's very Beatley too. Um, as is, however, absurd, which is
Yeah.
probably the most Beatley song on the album. But
Yep.
you know, there are times when I'm like, God, got to hear Pretty Little Head again because I love the whole production behind it. I love, you know, the use of the heavy drums. I love the vibraphone that's used in it. By the way, we didn't mention. I mean, we said Eric Stewart. Eric Stewart wrote. Um, this is off the top of my head here. I think it's 6 of the 10 songs on the vinyl album, and
Yeah.
altogether, I think it's 8 of
11
the
or
13.
12. Yeah, but I
Yeah,
think it was like 11 or 12 altogether. I think some, including Yvonne the One, which was never,
right.
except for on the 10cc
Which
album.
is a
But
very good song. That one I really
Yes,
liked,
I
Yvonne.
That's a
like
great
Yvonne
song.
the One.
yeah,
That's
That
I
really
agree.
is.
That should have been on the
Um,
album. Yeah.
yeah, I love Paul's writing with Eric Stewart, and I think it's a real shame that they didn't do more work together. And the story goes, by the way, we didn't mention this, that when the album was first when they started working on it, Eric Stewart was supposed to be
yes,
the producer, or Eric
he
thought he was
thought.
going to, yeah.
Mhm.
And eventually, Hugh Padgham became the producer, and Eric wasn't too happy about it. And Eric is not too crazy about the finished product, the way that it came
No,
out.
right.
So it might be interesting when the day comes when there's an archival box set of Press to Play to hear earlier versions of the songs, maybe more that Eric Stewart was producing or supervising at the time. I know there's a bootleg on some of that stuff with earlier versions,
Yep.
but I love the writing between Paul and Eric Stewart. I think it's really strong. Footprints is actually that's a favorite of mine. I love the imagery that's in Footprints of
Yeah.
a magpie and a lonely old man in the snow.
Mhm.
That's the bootleg
Hmm.
right there.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song and it builds with the white blanket bit. I love that. And
That part's nice. It's a
you
nice
know,
vision. It's a nice image.
It is. Yeah.
and
Mhm.
Jerry Marotta does great drumming on it. Really,
Yes,
the core of the album is Paul,
it's
Eric
Paul
Stewart, Jerry Marotta,
Jerry.
Yes,
Right.
I
but
agree.
Carlos Alomar was brought in.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right.
He's done a ton of work, known for being with David Bowie. A lot of his guitar playing is fantastic
Hmm.
on the album, especially the lead guitar work on Good Times Come and Feel the Sun. That's
Right.
another brilliant medley of 2
Yeah.
songs that somehow seamlessly work together. You know, you start off with a reggae-ish song like Good Times Coming, and it goes into a catchy chorus like Feel the Sun, and it just really works. Stranglehold is an excellent, excellent opening number.
Yeah.
You know, all the songs really work here. When Paul is at his best is when he gives you variety and he excels with the songs that he writes. I disagree with you, Joe,
Yeah, I was
respectfully
gonna say, well,
about you don't like the songs. I think they're all
no,
very well written. Forget about
sorry.
Oklahoma was never like this. Oh, I
Nah,
love
that's all
you
right.
very,
I love
very,
that. That's
very
one of
much.
my favorite songs. They're good. Another.
Okay,
I don't have to use Salamander. I could use that line
right.
because I like that
Yeah.
song.
Well, you know, it's like you said, you can sing along to songs with some nonsense lyrics and not care if you love the song or not.
Right.
And there are times when Paul has done that with some nonsense lyrics, and you
Junior's
still sing
Farm.
along with it anyway. I'm fine with
Yeah.
Junior's
it.
Junior's
Oh yeah,
Farm.
Um,
Junior's Farm. One of my all-time favorite rockers ever of his,
Yeah.
Beatles or after, and nonsense. A lot of it, if not all of it. I mean, I
yeah,
really like. I love it. So there you go. You know, when you like
you
it,
know,
it's working for you. The words are all
yeah,
right.
Mhm.
everybody's
Absolutely.
talking about the president. We all chipped in for a bag of cement.
Vegas the Mint. Right.
What does that mean? But I'm
Whatever you
singing
Ali
want it
along
to
with
Hardy.
it.
mean.
Talk about
Whatever you
Ali
want it to
Hardy
be.
too.
Exactly.
It's whatever you want. And angry, I completely disagree with you, Joe. Angry is like a sped up soily.
Mm.
I'm not wild about
It
soil
really is.
either.
Oh,
Oh,
come on,
but
come on.
but
And then,
I enjoy watching it. I mean, a lot of it's like that. Some concert things I can enjoy in concert. I don't like hearing it as much as I like "Beware My Love" a lot. How's that?
okay,
Mhm.
fine.
That's
I
good.
just,
But
oh,
and the bonus tracks on the CD make a huge difference for me. I
Yeah,
mean, if I was just judging this album on the 10 songs on the vinyl, it may not be my number two album, but those extra three songs make a huge difference.
I'm not
agreed.
And
wild
I,
about the extra songs either, Ken. I gotta let you down there too.
Uh,
I actually, but the one thing about those are somehow how it happens. Who knows? As a collector and a fan, but over the decades, I haven't really heard those. Those I haven't really heard much. So I only played them a couple of times. They didn't really do anything for me. Although I haven't heard. I don't think I ever heard Hang Glide. Hang Glide though. I
oh, we
don't
got to
think.
talk about Hang Glide.
yeah, Hang Glide is, I think, would make an excellent a track for McCartney too. Myself, I think
Yeah.
at 5 minutes it might be a little too long, but I think it's a really nice little work between Eric Stewart and Paul McCartney as well.
Yeah, Saul Perez is talking about that. Not the video, but in the what is that video? The home video thing when he's in the studio and he's
Right.
doing it. He says cheapest video I've ever done.
Yeah.
I love that bit. I love when he's playing that in the studio. He's going through it in that. I
Yeah.
forget what the documentary that was.
Yeah, I forget
Mm.
too. So,
Look
all right,
at
Tom, what are you? Oh,
I'm
sorry.
sorry. Tom Brennan wrote, Oklahoma was never like this. The movement you need is on your shoulder. What's the difference?
A lot of difference. A lot of difference, and not just because it's John. I always love that line.
Yep.
And then later, when I heard him say that John insisted, that's a good line. You got to keep that line. I thought,
I
oh,
know.
great, it was John. I never knew that. I don't know, like the wherewithal, the motivation you need is right here. It's right here on your head. It's right there.
Mhm.
Okay. It's how you interpret it.
Yeah,
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 right.
yeah.
It
That's
is.
it. That's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Tom, what are some of your favorite,
Well,
strongest tracks?
yeah, one of my favorite parts about 80s music is there was a lot of great songs that had a lot of great sax work in it. A lot of great sax
Mm.
solos, whether it was throughout the song or it was just a solo. Um, but and I love Stranglehold for that because I think it was great sax work by Dick Morrissey, which I think Paul said was his favorite saxophone player at that time. The album came out in August. Okay, summertime. What song on this album feels like summertime to you? Good times
Good times
coming.
coming.
Feel the
Hmm.
Yep.
sun. I think that would have made a pretty good first single. Just my opinion. I like the vocals on it. Um, I think it could have done without the Feel the Sun because it's at 3.5 minutes when it goes into Feel the Sun. I like the Good Times Coming. I think it's an excellent track. The Feel the Sun part is good, I think, but I think he could have cut that part off and just left it as is. But I enjoyed it either way. It's not a big deal for me. But what else? I can't get over that eerie beginning and the talking on Talk More Talk. Through the beginning and then towards the end, it just creeps me out. It's like a Revolution 9 bit,
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
Footprints for me, I think is the hidden gem. Like I think Don said that earlier on the show. I think it's beautiful. I love the Spanish guitar work. I love the singing. A lot of the lyrics I like. I like the old white blanket part of the songs. I think that's really nice. Ken, Only Love Remains. It's great. But I don't think it's Maybe I'm Amazed and No More Lonely Nights and My Love great. I
Yeah,
think
I
it's
have to concur.
just
I
I think
appreciate, I
it's
respect Ken's
just
opinion, but I don't think it's near his best.
but it's great. It's a great song. I love it. Press
Okay.
of course is good. Now, Pretty Little Head, I will say I love the 12-inch version of that because his vocals are a little bit more clear. I do respect what you said, Ken, because I do appreciate him changing his voice because the voice you hear on the album, it's kind of like muddled. It's kind of like a little hidden. You don't really understand exactly what he's saying unless you're reading the lyrics. When you listen to the 12-inch, you kind of understand him a little better. And then if you watch the video, which is right here on McCartney years
Mm.
of Pretty Little Head, what does it start with? Anybody know?
She's Leaving
He's
Home.
Leaving Home,
Mhm.
exactly. Which
Oh,
I
right,
think,
right. And that's
which,
another video you mentioned that I enjoy. I like that
yeah,
video. I like that
Great
video.
which
video.
I think
Yeah.
was a
Very
nice. I think
weird.
it was a nice little
Mhm.
Yeah,
touch. I think it
it's
was a
weird.
nice little touch to that. Angry, if I can just say, I'm again, Ken, sorry, but I just think it was a waste of talent of Pete's and Phil's talent. I think those guys are two very talented musicians, and it's an okay rocker in my opinion. But I just think it could have been better if you have Pete Townsend and Phil Collins, Paul McCartney. I love the beginning bass line of Paul. I think that's
Hmm.
excellent. I think his vocals are excellent, but I just think it could have been fine with just Jerry and Carlos working on that, and Paul and Eric. I don't think you needed. I think it was kind of like almost like a wasted opportunity, in my opinion, with Pete Townsend and Phil Collins on that song.
Okay.
However, Serb, it's very Beatlesque, very Lennon-ish. I like how his vocals sound on that, but it's also very, to my ears, it's kind of down. It's just the melody and the way it sounds. It's kind of like
I'm
down
still trying to hear
sounding.
the Beatles
Yeah.
connection in it. To me personally, don't seem like doesn't
I
sound
think
like
it,
that
I
to
think
Oh,
it's
me.
very
very. I think
Beatley.
it's yeah. I think it's very
Why don't
67.
I love it then?
Mhm.
I always wonder that
Probably
about Beatles songs that sound like the
Probably
Beatles.
because John's not on it. Maybe I don't know.
No,
Um,
no, no, no.
But for me, Stranglehold, Good Times Coming, Footprints, Only Love Remains, Press, um, those five songs make this album for me. Right away, it's in the same writing style as I'll Give You a Ring, which I think is
Hmm.
excellent. I love, and It's Not True. I think it's a great song as well. And Tough on a Tightrope. I agree with you, Ken. Those three songs add to the album. I think it makes it a better album as well. And maybe it would have been cool to see Spies Like Us on the finished album, but I think it's great where it is. I think it works better as a standalone, anyways. But what?
Okay.
No, before I forget, I think I remembered. You can't judge an album by its cover. This is a beautiful cover.
Yes,
It's
it
a beautiful
is.
Mhm.
cover, but
Mhm.
what the heck does it have to do with the album? And it doesn't. And it doesn't even have. It doesn't have to necessarily. But wouldn't this have been so good, like on a standards album or something? Like it's old. It's very like old fashioned, retro kind of. That would fit like on like the Kiss on the Bottom type of thing.
Mhm.
If he had done a standards album around this time. So I just thought I'd throw that in. I mean, the cover's a beautiful cover. I just feel it doesn't complement the album in any way though. But it's a nice
Yeah.
photo.
I'm
Uh,
actually
Mm.
good
trying to
point.
scroll here
It
the
it
name of the photographer.
um
I can't find it now, of
George
course.
Hurrell, I think.
I believe that's
Mm.
right.
That
Yeah.
um
Yeah,
that
George
album cover.
Hurrell.
Yeah,
Yep,
okay.
Hollywood veteran who used the same box
Yeah,
camera he used in the 30s and 40s. Oh,
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it
It's a beautiful
really
photo.
is.
yes,
Sort of reminds
absolutely.
me a little bit of Double Fantasy,
Mm.
Mhm.
as it's like, you have
A
John and
little bit.
Yoko in the front.
Somebody
Yeah.
said that on one of my I had a live stream. Was it Richard Dolan? Yeah, Richard Dolan. Richard. I got you. He says, "Oh, what about Double Fantasy? That's too. What does that got to do with anything?" I said, "What does it got to do with anything? The whole album is about a husband and wife and their whole marriage together and everything.
Yeah,
That fits."
I mean, yeah, that makes perfect sense. That's true. So,
Can I respond
yeah,
to what Tom was just saying? Just
Yeah,
a few
please
things.
do. Yeah.
Um,
yeah, sure.
I love Angry as a song. I love the way
Hmm.
it came out, but I totally
Right.
agree with you. One of the few faults that I have with Paul is that very often he'll have so many talented people that he works with that he doesn't utilize them to the best of their abilities.
Mm.
And, if you've got Pete Townsend and Phil Collins in the studio with you, hey, spend a
Yeah.
week if you
Right.
can,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
same thing with the Rockestra the whole idea.
I
You
was
Yeah.
had
just going to
so
mention
many
that. Yeah.
That's
great
a good point.
musicians on the Rockestra lineup, and you have Rockestra theme, which I love.
Yeah,
Again,
me too.
the only thing
I
that
love it
matters
too.
is, do you like the songs? And I still
Yes,
like the songs, but if you've got so many talented people, and yes, you had So Glad to See You here, I know,
I was going to say
but
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
still, when you've got so many talented people, you kind of wish that Paul would do more with them.
Right.
Nothing wrong with the song "Angry," nothing wrong with the way that it came out,
Right.
but
Wow.
you
Wow.
got a two great songwriters there, two great musicians.
Right.
Try to do more with them. That's what I would have done.
Hmm.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
Agreed.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you seem to have a problem with songs that are downers or depressing to you. I mean,
It's not that I don't. I think if I don't connect with it lyrically, I'm all about downer music. I mean, I've got tons of downer music, but I connect with it. You know,
right.
if I don't connect with it lyrically, I'm not
Yeah.
going to enjoy it musically either.
Okay.
Mm,
Yeah,
Yep.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I like when he throws out different lyrics, like in However Absurd and Talk More Talk,
absolutely.
Mhm.
Right,
especially. Yeah.
right,
Yeah, yeah. Well, as for
right. Get
me, as I mentioned earlier, Stranglehold. I thought that was a great way to kick off the album. I mean that the bass.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm sorry. It's a little on the awkward. I haven't attacked that song. It's a little uneven, a little awkward, kind of up and down, but it's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, I like the guitar. I like the drums, the tight harmonies on it.
yeah.
Like the little kind of echo. Gives it a little, I don't know, kind of 50s rock, sort of sound. I like that. As we've been talking about, Good Times Coming, Feel the Sun. I mean, that's my summer jam every year. I
Yeah,
still play it.
Good.
I love it.
yeah,
Yeah, particularly Good Times Coming, that reggae. And
yeah.
and Paul's revisited reggae many, many times. He clearly loves that genre and definitely is great at it. Only Love Remains. I'll echo everybody here. That's one of my favorite Paul love songs. Should have been a bigger hit.
Hmm.
I think it was. I think it only. Uh, King of charts here. I think it only charted on Adult Contemporary, right?
That's
It was,
true. That's true. And that
yeah,
was a different mix too.
Yeah,
yeah. That's with the
And it had a
saxophone, right?
yeah, yep.
yeah. I
Yeah,
think we
I
should
prefer the
say.
album version though.
Yeah, I think we
yeah.
should say that all of these singles were different mixes as well. I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
And
so. I mean, there were,
we should
yeah, that's why that's going to be a whole different show.
When I brought a while ago when I showed the alternate CD. The
hmm
strange thing about that, somebody sent it to me, watched my YouTube channel, and said, "Listen to this. Let me know if you like this better." And I must be honest and say, yeah, some of these mixes, I was enjoying them better than the actual album. And I'm thinking, well, as I maintain, it's not the mixing or the production or anything that I
Yeah.
don't like on the album, but I enjoyed, maybe because of the change or something. I don't know the difference, just to have a change. But I
hmm
really did like some of them a little more on that CD. I thought
Yeah,
that's
it's
all.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how different mixes can make a big difference. It
that
really is.
happens
Now,
a lot. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
now
I
I'm probably one of the few people that actually like the album version of Only Love Remains better than the sax. And I love saxophone, but for
Me
some
too.
reason
Hmm.
I like
So do
a
I.
little bit of the simpler version better. But maybe it's just because that's the one I'm more used to than the sax version. But I mean, I'll take them both. But I love them both. But
And as we're talking about Only Love Remains here tonight, I got to say, I really, 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 really like that song. Now,
it's beautiful.
and I did know that's the one of all of them that's really made a major leap for me. Well, the rest of the
Yeah.
whole album did not, but that song, I was like, yeah, that's a really, really good Paul
and
ballad.
his vocals are just
Yeah,
flawless on that.
Yep.
Just
Yeah.
flawless.
And
I
so strong at the end,
yeah,
those
yeah,
real high
absolutely.
notes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Agreed.
and the it's just flawless, and the lyrics are just so sincere and just so mature. I mean, it's
Hmm.
just a perfect love song. I love it. And Press, as we talked about, great guitar solo in the middle. It's just
Hmm.
great rocker, and some people have mentioned the video, and we talked about that a little bit earlier. I think that's one of his best videos, and it was very simple,
Hmm.
just him in the tube station, but just seeing him interacting with fans it was just a lot of fun, and really enhanced the song. I think.
Hmm.
I love Pretty Little Head.
Good.
It's weird, and the lyrics. When you read them, he was definitely having fun with some wordplay and all that, but that's great. Um, and the video, as some of our viewers have been mentioning, and we talked about a little bit, it also enhanced the song, and I think to have a little bit of "She's Leaving Home" playing right before the
Hmm.
song. I mean, it kind of I never thought of them connecting, but
Yeah.
it kind of does. And Tom, Adrian Allen asked that we mention. I think he connects in his book Pretty Little
Right.
Head. And I don't have his book yet. So is it Tonight that he connects it to Genesis?
He sent me a link to that, and I hadn't had a chance to read it yet, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, he
So,
said to a Genesis song, and I was guessing Tonight,
right.
but I don't know.
Mm,
I'm not sure. But he was saying that he thought it sounded like a Genesis song, and that was the one I was guessing, but I don't know. But
what song
in
was that
any
again? What song?
I think it's Tonight.
No, the first song you mentioned.
Move
What you pretty
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 Little
Little
Head.
Head? Okay.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
that's the
don't
one
know
he
if
was
it's
talking about.
in this one,
That's
or
my
he did
guess.
send. Yeah, because it's going to be in volume 2. He sent me the his
The
writing
link.
on that, and
Okay.
yeah, and I just hadn't had a chance to read it yet.
Gotcha. Okay, but in any case, it's I love it. That's the one of my all-time favorites from this album. It's just it's so weird and but that's the experimental side of Paul that I
Right.
like and
Mhm.
as I said, foreshadows fireman stuff. Um
Yep.
okay guys, I like Angry. Now, I will agree that he didn't use Phil Collins and Pete Townsend to their greatest capabilities. I completely agree with that. I mean, if I hadn't read in advance that they were on that track, I never would have known it. I mean,
True.
Yeah.
that's how, I mean, really, that's how much they were underutilized. So I completely agree with that.
Mhm.
But it's a great rocker. It really
Yeah.
is, and also if you're pissed off, that's a great song to listen to.
Right.
You mean if
True.
you're
Yep.
angry?
If you're angry, it is. It's great. That and AC/DC. I mean, you can if you're pissed off, crank those. But seriously, it's a fun rocker. I mean, it's not one of his all time best, but it's I've cranked it many a time. And as far as the others, Move Over Busker's fun. Yeah, May Westerner sweaty vest. That line is always
What
stuck
do
in
you
my.
think of Errol Flynn in a tiger skin? There's an image.
Yeah, and interesting images in those songs. I mean, it's a fun rocker. It's not one of my all time favorites from the album. Yeah, however absurd and Footprints are the ones that I've never really connected with. I just those are the two that we were talking earlier about
However
not
absurd.
resonating.
It,
Those are the two.
yeah. Just going over the Pretty Little Head that Adrian sent me. It was Tonight.
Yes, I thought
I'll have
that
to
was it.
listen to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I never
I
connected
thought
them.
it
Yeah.
was the percussion that I thought was probably the connection. Yeah.
Right.
And they were, yeah, and as Mike points out, yes, they were both produced by Hugh Badgem. So
Get some.
yeah,
Right. Yep.
I figured. So
Yeah.
and then we were just briefly mentioning the bonus tracks. I love Right Away. I think that's a fun
Hmm.
song, and
Yep.
has a little jazz kind of keyboard solo to it. It's fun. Tough on a
And
Tightrope, as you mentioned, Ken. That I like that song. I wish that
it's
had been on
brilliant.
the album.
Yeah.
Brilliant. It's not
Excuse,
true. I've never been as insane about,
It's not
but
true.
excuse me 1 second,
Well,
guys. I have to excuse myself for 1 second. I'll be right
oh,
back.
sure, no problem,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
problem.
well,
Um,
it's not true. There's a version that was on the B side of Press, and
mhm,
it's more of a regular without all the electronic stuff that was put
mhm,
on the bonus track on the CD.
yeah,
It's just the band doing it. So it's not all those heavy drums. And I've grown to like that version too. I like both versions. I still prefer the more simpler version that was the B side. But as a
yeah.
song, I still love it.
Yeah,
Eh,
I don't know. That's another one that's just never really
I think
connected.
I actually enjoy that one. I mean, the most for me right now out of the bonus tracks that I've heard. You know,
You know.
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
don't know.
I don't
Um,
know.
I'm gonna save this for Tom. But anyway, I've even got
Now, okay,
I even collect the cassette. What do you think, huh?
that's what I first bought it on. Was a
Oh
cassette.
yeah.
Yep, that's
Anything
what
different on here? I can't see
that.
it.
no.
Yeah, because I think it was. Yeah, it definitely did not contain the three bonus tracks.
Hmm.
That was just a plain
However
old.
absurd.
But you know
That was
something,
just.
Kit? You were saying how this foreshadowed the fireman.
Yeah.
And it's very true in a way because the song Talk More Talk
Mhm.
was a song that was created from scratch in one day in the studio. which is very much the same approach of what Paul did with Youth on
Right.
Electric Arguments. So, yeah, very experimental. What can you come up with from start to finish in one day?
Yeah.
And, I love it just knowing that background behind it. So,
Exactly.
yeah. We didn't talk enough about Hang Glide. And I was
so
wondering
yes.
what you thought about it, Kit.
It is an interesting track, and as Tom said earlier, that it does. I think it would fit in pretty well with McCartney too. It is a bit more, experimental like that, and oh, good, Tom's back just in time. We were just talking about it. Tom, we were just starting to talk about Hang Glide.
Oh, very cool.
So just back in time. So yeah.
Yes.
So I think I mean it's not one of my all-time favorites of Paul's, but it's an interesting, another kind of experimental kind of track. So Tom, what about you?
I
I
agree.
agreed what you said about McCartney too. That would fit nicely on there.
Right. I think at 5 minutes it might run a little too long, but
I agree.
I agree. It's a nice little instrumental. Instrumentals are not my favorite part of McCartney's career. But I do get into this one. It's enjoyable. It's nice, soft little piece that I think would have fit nicely on the album. I think it would have been cool to have like a little nice instrumental on the album. Sometimes they work on his albums. He has them from time to time.
I like a lot of them on McCartney too. Even
Yeah.
I like the instrumentals.
Frozen
like
Jam.
Hey.
I love.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love the long version even more. The longer version.
You better like Hey Hey, because that's the theme that I use in every little thing.
I know.
My theme music.
I know.
So
I'm right with you, man. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But Hang Glide is really a very interesting track because apart from the fact that it's instrumental, if you played it to people, they wouldn't necessarily think it's Paul McCartney. And it's
Right.
got like a new age sound to it, kind of ambient sound, maybe closer to the first two Fireman albums.
Right.
And a lot of interesting stuff going on with the synthesizers, very moody music. And I like that kind of stuff. I like
Blue
what
Sway.
Eyes
Very.
did with
Tom
that.
Brennan mentioned Blue Sway.
Yes,
I like that.
I like Blue Sway too. That's one
Oh.
of my favorite of his instrumentals. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like the
Well,
work.
there's-
I do
there's
like the work
lyrics in
between
Blue Sway.
Eric's. Yeah, I do like the work between Eric Stewart and McCartney on this. I think their collaborations, a lot of them were successful. I think a couple of them might have been a miss, but I think this Hang Glide was definitely a nice piece.
Absolutely.
There's one line. There's one line on this album that is among my favorite McCartney lines of all time. But the problem is, it was written with Eric Stewart, so I'm not sure which guy wrote it.
Uh-oh.
And I think
No,
that
no,
track
which line?
also.
What's the line?
Let's see the line. I'll tell
The
you.
line is from However Absurd.
Yeah,
Everything is under the sun, but nothing is for keeps. I love that line.
There's
I think Eric
thought.
Stewart wrote it.
Yeah. If I ever get to interview Paul, I'd love to.
That's a good question. That's a good
there's-
Which
question.
one of you guys wrote that?
Yeah, there's a really good interview with Eric Stewart that came out a few years back ago that I think was on the Super Deluxe website. If you guys are familiar with
Yeah.
that, that's I think
I
that
read
was there. And then I also think this album is really helped when you listen to it with headphones. I think you
I
really
agree.
get all the the lower tones, and if there's instruments a little lower in the mix, you get a clear sound of that, and I think that really helps this album out a lot as well.
And all the different percussion and everything too. I
Yeah,
think.
exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of different sounds on this
Yes.
album, and either listen in headphones or alone in a room and just concentrate on the music alone.
Yep, listening alone in a dark room to those voices as Talk More Talk begins. It's great.
I have a nightmare, I'm afraid.
All
I
right.
heard James McCartney does some. I was reading in the liner notes who does some of the voices.
Yeah,
there.
James
He's one of them. And Linda.
Linda,
Yep.
John Hamill, John's Paul's assistant.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. So, All right. Well, we're getting close to the end here, so why don't we, before we go into our what we're working on, that we call these occasional shows we do this occasional series another listen. So all these years later, this came out in 1986, so we're 2020 now. So what what do you guys think? We've taken another listen now, all these years later. How do you think the album's aged? Have your opinions changed since you first listened to it? How do you think the album has aged? So, Tom, what do you think?
I'm fine with, overall. I mean, I'm kind of with Ken in a way sometimes when you talk about, the aging and, the production. Does it sound like this decade? Does it sound like that decade?
Mhm.
However, Paul has, if you, listen to the video, or if you will listen to the commentary on the Pretty Little Head video that's on this, I mean, he has said that, this is of its time,
Mhm.
and but it's what he said. For me, I kind of enjoyed a few more songs, a little bit more. I mean, my favorite songs, continue to be my favorite songs on these albums. But listening to them with headphones, or re-listening to the 12-inch mix of Pretty Little Head made me enjoy that more than the version that's on the LP. But it's for me, it's still like the middle of the road McCartney release. It's if let's for example, if he had, let's say he had 14 albums in his career at that point in time, this would be like right in the middle at number 7 for me. I mean, I don't consider it a terrible album. I don't consider it a great album, but I do enjoy the tracks on here, and I'm gonna spin this one. I'm gonna spin this one for another week or two, and just see if I can, have more fun with it. I'm glad we did this
Great.
show. I know a lot of people wanted us to do this show, and
Yep.
glad we're doing it.
Well, all right. Excellent. All right. Joe, how about you?
Well, I'm only going to reiterate what I said at the top. It hasn't changed much for me. I dislike it less than I did when it first came out.
Well, there you go.
Um,
That's a resounding.
Okay, there's hope.
like
I
whereas
just
something
like the press.
Like Gone Troppo got significantly, better for me
Yep.
over the time. Not this one too much, but not nearly as much as originally. I didn't care for it. It's not
Hmm.
an album I'm interested at all in going to. If
Hmm.
I was going to go to it, I would bounce around. Play maybe Stranglehold and.
Hmm.
Good Times Coming and Bounce Around a Little, Pretty Little Head, and
Hmm.
Only Love Remains Press. A few tracks, selected tracks. Whereas I always believe when I play albums, I like them to be in their entirety, the way they were
Right.
intended. Ordinarily, very rarely will I skip around. But I would for this album, I probably would do that. Not as easy to do when you have the cassette. If I, by the way, if I disappear, boop, it's just because my battery just is down to 15%. Even though I'm
Oh,
using
okay.
the electrical, I'm good for 80 minutes or so. That's about it with this.
Okay, we're good. All right, we'll be good. All right, Ken, how about you?
I liked the album when it first came out. It just keeps growing and growing in stature for me. Like I said, it's my second favorite McCartney album post Beatles, including all of Wings. Um, I really, I really find his music more interesting when he went into his solo career, and the fact that he worked with different producers. I think that brings out another side of him, working with different musicians too. I think that tends to make you more creative. And I look at Press to Play as the beginning of Paul's Renaissance period, because really and truly, so much of the best work of Paul's post Beatles career started with, shouldn't say started, from the moment of Press to Play on, most of it has been extremely good. And I love the 70s stuff too, and Tug of War is a masterpiece too. But from Press to Play on, it marked a whole new time to me in his career, because I really sensed a lot of effort being put into his albums. We've said a number of times here that we don't think that Paul is the best judge of his own work. There's plenty of times when we think certain songs belonged on albums that he tossed aside as B-sides. So even if Paul said it's of its time, you know, I think he's very affected by record sales and the fact
Yeah.
that it didn't do that well.
I
So
think he's
that's
more
why
affected by the sales and the critic response and fan
yeah,
response more than what he personally thinks of it, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Can
Paul,
I?
but I don't agree with everything that he says.
Yeah.
But
Can
yeah,
I ask you a question, Ken?
yeah.
When do you think you? I mean, with all the great albums that have came out after Press to Play, when did you come to that realization that this was your second favorite McCartney album?
Probably in the last 10 years or so.
Okay.
I just love it. Sounds so refreshing to listen to Press to Play. It doesn't sound dated to me. It sounds like it could have come out yesterday. There's so much energy. Like I said, I love the way that it was mixed. I like heavy drums. I
Right.
like the sound of that.
Mhm.
I would kill to have a whole album of Pretty Little Heads. I really would. I'd love to hear that. I love when Paul takes chances and does things different and doesn't just do what you would expect him to do.
Right.
But Paul usually is somewhere in the middle. He mixes things up for you so that he tries to please, the old fans that want, the older sound of Paul. That's why he puts in Only Love Remains or Stranglehold or Footprints or a Move Over Busker, which is more a traditional rocker for him, or However Absurd, which is very Beatley. But then he mixes in all this other stuff. And so many times, a lot of his experimental stuff he tosses as B-sides, like Hand
Hmm.
Glide.
Right.
There's a track
Tough
that
on a
was,
tightrope.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, I don't know if I call that experimental. Something like Growing Up Falling Down from the
Mm,
Chaos and Creation sessions that, it sounds very different
yeah.
from, the rest of the album. But I think he does that because maybe some of his fans can't accept when he tries to be more adventurous and daring.
Mm,
It's a tough thing. There are so many people out there that are critical of Paul McCartney because they think that he's Mr. Top 40, he's Mr. Mainstream. And when he puts out experimental stuff like this, then they don't get it. They don't
right.
they don't enjoy it as much. And so he can't please everybody.
Right.
But I really enjoy it when he does take these chances. And it's because of that that I tend to really dig cuts like Krina Kror now,
Hmm.
or Loop First Indian on the Moon. I love when he does these wacky things on his albums that it's not what you would normally expect from him.
Right.
So Press to Play, I think is flawless as an album. It really is. And when it comes to that 80s sound, Pretty Little Head and Talk More Talk and Press are excellent pieces of production and great examples of those.
Hmm.
So, you know, I really love this album more today than I ever have.
Mm.
Do you
Yeah,
like it then?
and
Yes, he likes it. I think the band likes it.
he
Yeah.
likes it. And yeah, I really I still enjoy it. It was a lot of fun to revisit it. Although I still listen to it fairly often, but hadn't listened to the entire thing in a while, and it was just it still I think it's a joy to listen to a lot of it. As I said, there were still a couple of tracks that I don't connect with quite as much, but um, you know, listening to Pretty Little Head is still a trip, which I really enjoy.
Mm.
Only Love Remains, I is still moving. Really, I think a lot of people accuse it of having dated production, as we've talked about, but I don't think it really has dated much at all. I mean, not as nearly as much
Mm.
Yeah,
as
somebody was just
this.
saying he thought that I forget who Tug of War would sounded more dated to him than Press to Play. Somebody just said
Mhm.
it in the
Yeah.
Yeah,
comments.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, because really, that's what it's always what everybody says about
If you
press
want
to
to say
play is,
dated,
yeah, exactly. Oh, it's so dated. It really, I
you
don't
know,
think it really doesn't sound dated at all. So, I really, I think, well, I think we can say, go back and listen to it. Give it another chance. I think although a lot of people
just
hear it,
kidding.
Just don't have Joe in the room.
No,
Don't
no,
invite Joe.
no. The truth of the matter is, I did that for fun.
yeah,
But no, by all means, listen to it. By all means, listen to it and
absolutely,
form your own opinion and give it an open mind and
exactly.
see if
Listen
you
with an
like it.
open mind. Exactly. Listen with an open mind, and let us know. Let us know what you think. We love to hear. Go back, listen to it with an open mind all these years later, and see if your opinions have changed. So, well, this was fun. We've been looking forward to doing this show for a while, and as I said, popular demand. We've
Yeah,
people have been wanting us to do this,
this is
so
yeah.
we're more than happy to do it. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we will see you next time. Please stay safe.
Yes,
Please stay
all of you.
Yep.
healthy. So, on behalf of me, Mr. Mayo, Tom Hanyati, and Ken Michaels, this is Kid O'Toole saying peace and love. See you guys
Peace
next
and
time.
love.
Bye bye.